Hello farmers and aspiring farmers. Thank you for tuning in to yet another informative edition of your program. This is Agriculture New Directions, Agribusiness. We are in winter in Zimbabwe, and as such we are going to be looking at the type of crops that Zimbabwean farmers can take advantage of and produce so that they sustain their livelihoods and also participate in the growth of our economy. Today we are going to be looking at peas meant for the export market, and to discuss this and more I've taken the liberty of inviting Francis Mapindani. He is a seasoned agronomist, horticultural expert working with Seedco right here in Zimbabwe. Francis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Waza, for having me on your show again.
Yes. As we get into this discussion, Francis, I want us to look at generally the main reason or the essence of why you encourage or why it has been stipulated that peas for export is produced during the winter season in Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much, Waza, for that question. The first thing that I can obviously mention is obviously the nature of the peas. Peas, we're looking at peas being a crop which favors the cooler temperatures that we receive during the winter period here in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe has a really perfect environment for growing winter peas, for these export peas, the mash 2 and the sugar snap as well as the shelling peas that we generally know here in Zimbabwe. But as we look into it, one of the major problems that comes from growing these peas out of their window, which is the winter period, is that they get so easily stressed with our harsh summers that we get here in Zimbabwe, which actually brings through problems like abortion of flowers or probably just even having stunted growth as well, which affects the formation of your peas and also at the end of the day affecting your yield. So definitely we know that the favorite temperatures are the cooler temperatures, so that you don't stress your crop, so that it actually gets to have more successful flowers that turn into your pods, and then we get a good bumper harvest at the end of the day. So basically that's mostly it. And also looking into another thing as well, pest pressure. It's very much more serious during the summer period because of the high breeding that happens, especially elements like the thrips, and also you're looking at some larvas as well that affect our peas as well, including some bollworms. All of those, they actually affect our peas, and they produce much more faster during the summer season. So we definitely need to make sure that we try to grow our peas in the right window, and if we choose to go outside of the window, let's make sure that we go in knowing the things that stress our crops and trying to find ways of circumnavigating them.
What could be the reason that causes, or the limitations that you might want to highlight that might result in the way that our Zimbabwean farmers are a bit shying away or rejecting the production of peas?
Thank you, Waza. I think it all comes down to the market mostly. The marketing side of peas, especially these export peas, which are the mash 2 and the sugar snap, they are a bit harder to market locally, because I feel us as Zimbabweans, as the consumers, we are much more used to the shelling peas. It actually comes down to the demand for the mash 2 and the sugar snap on the local market as well, which inhibits our farmers from growing them locally. So it leaves our farmers with obviously the major market for them, which are the overseas markets. We're looking at the European markets. We're looking also at the Middle East markets as well. Those are markets which actually produce quite good demand for those. But it comes through with obviously a lot of challenges as well when you're meant to produce crops that are going outside the country. It comes from the level of investment that our farmers are supposed to put into their crop, so that they have the infrastructure that is needed to actually make sure that the crop has a good cold chain management, right from the
storage facilities,
the storage facilities as well, including the refrigeration, just to make sure that your crop actually gets to live for a bit longer, and also the freighting costs as well. They can be a bit inhibitive for our farmers. So it's something that really affects our farmers. And also another important thing that I can try to bring through is the issue of certifications. Most of the markets which buy these peas actually get to demand your farm to be certified to be growing produce that is accepted globally. So that is one thing that really has been affecting our farmers. But of late though, we have been seeing some aggregators that have been coming through. We have been helping smallholder farmers to actually come through and start to grow these peas
for the export market,
as well, without the major trouble of getting into the costly certification process as well. There are companies which are doing group certifications which are coming through as well. So I feel like our farmers should actually get to research more before they actually get into this piece, because it's a bit of a delicate side as well. You can get your peas and then you use the wrong chemical, and your product gets confiscated, probably in the Netherlands, and you don't get to enjoy your returns because probably it has been confiscated and just been burnt that side, and you don't get any compensation for that.
Okay, now Francis, as we round off this segment, so I would want you to talk to us in terms of those agroecological zones that support this kind of production, and also the soil types that you find appropriate for peas production.
I will look into the agroecological zones, looking mostly at what the peas actually require. Like I mentioned, obviously we need the cooler temperatures.
Okay.
So definitely it kind of like inhibits some regions, obviously, which are going to be a little bit higher in the temperature side, which might affect obviously the physiology of your crop, including the stress that it actually gets. Like I mentioned, heat stresses these crops and they get to drop their yields. So that's one thing that we have to look at. And another thing as well, which I would really feel is more important, since these are crops that are much more temperature sensitive and they also require a good cold chain operation as well, it would actually have to look into the distance from probably the freighting ports, especially here in Zimbabwe. I feel like I would really feel like the airport is one of the major areas where most of the produce is exported outside the country.
Okay.
You would need to have a good distance, obviously, closer to the country. But one thing that is needed, get a place which is much more cooler, especially the agroecological regions within the ones and the twos as well. Those are actually quite great as well because of the cooler temperatures that they get. But we've been having great farmers as well coming through, even from as far as Gweru. We have been doing some of these, and we recently have some new farmers as well in Mashingo, even who are actually growing these varieties and trying to export them as well. So at the end of the day, it would really come through as a perfect thing to actually try to look into the distance from your market and try to look if your agroecological zone would be perfect for that. But ideally, the cooler ones are much more accepted. On the soil side, we need well draining soils.
Yes,
most definitely. Well draining soils are much more necessary for those ones, because obviously you don't want your soils to be quite loggy. You don't want your soils to be more waterlogged, as it will affect obviously your root respirations. Your crops will actually start to suffer more and it will affect the performance of your crops. So definitely well-drained soils are much more suitable.
There, here, viewers, we are looking at peas production during the winter season here in Zimbabwe. We're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the second segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, viewers, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030. Today, we are looking at peas production, given that we are in the winter season. Now, viewers, encourage you to be a part of these conversations. Feel free to get in touch with the producer, Wadzanai Manyore, so 0772-807-506. Alternatively, you can like our Facebook page, Agribusiness with Wadzanai, make a follow-up on this episode and more, and leave your comments and suggestions. They are most welcome to us. Our YouTube channel is Agribusiness with Wadzanai. We are also now available on X, formerly known as Twitter. It's at Agribusiness 110. Francis, we are here in the second segment. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Rosa.
Now, as we get into this discussion, Francis, I want us to look at this scenario we have in here where we are standing. We have trellising. What could be the purpose of trellising within peas production?
Thank you so much, Wada, for the question. And trellising is something which is very important when it comes to our peas, especially the export kind, because we are trying to make sure that we try by all means to manage the diseases, obviously, that get into our field. Because if we leave these peas untrellised, obviously they'll be just lying on the ground, and when we water, there's so much contact with the soil, which is a bit more damp, and it encourages more microbial action onto our plants as well, causing problems like the diseases that include the ascochyta blight. We're looking at diseases like the powdery mildews, even because our field is not quite as well aerated, because our crop is obviously just lying on the ground. So we definitely need to make sure that our hygiene within the field is kind of aided by the trellising that we're going to bring through. And also the trellising just comes through as well as something that aids that really comes through to improve our product quality as well, because obviously if it's going to be lying on the ground, if we're not going to leave not put any trellising on it, we might have some problems like bruising on the pods as well, which might affect the quality and also the health of the pod as well, because once it's crashed, that's an inlet of infection as well, which might actually get to affect our crop.
Okay, now Francis, I want us to touch a bit on the varieties. Can you talk to us in terms of some of the varieties that are available for the market, including the days to maturity?
Lovely. So we'll start off with the first category, which I mentioned, which is the Munch 2. The most popular varieties are the the Snow Green and the Snow Wind. These are varieties that you can grow, and you can start to harvest them from around 75 days from the day of sowing. So we're looking at you trying to make sure that you keep your crop healthy and much more well managed as well in terms of the nutrition and everything being in place. You need to make sure that within 75 days you're almost ready to harvest. So if you don't get within that range, definitely means that we might have skipped some stages within the plant's growth. So we definitely need to make sure that within 75 days we manage to get our first harvest. But if you have noticed that if with the earlier crops as well, which are kind of like grown within the probably we're looking at around week 6 or week 8 of the year, which is around mid-February to end of February, those crops can even get to mature as early as within the 65-day range, because of the higher heat units that we'll still be receiving during that time. But although it will not be quite as hot, because obviously we're now encroaching into winter, we're starting to have the shorter days, so the temperatures might not be quite as harsh as the ones that we receive during this major summer period, which is during the October-November period. We're looking at something that can actually just speed up your growth as well. Then for another thing as well that I can mention, they're both determinate varieties, which means that they are bush type. They are going to grow to probably to around 1 meter to 1.2 meters tall maximum. And then the other one, it's a variety called Sugar Lady, which is a variety that is a bit much more determinate for those ones who don't want to get into the hassle of trellising their crop to be too high. That's a variety that can be grown up to around 1.2 meters, just like what I mentioned with the Munch 2s, and it's a variety that can mature within 75 to 80 days as well.
So talk to us in terms of the seed rate, expected yield per hectare, the types of fertilizers that you can come with from basal dressing, top dressing, and even the supplements as we round this segment.
Lovely. So I'll start off with the seed rate that you mentioned. The seed rate, when it comes to peas, we're looking at a rate that hovers between 50 to around 60 kilograms
per hectare. Okay.
Yes. So we're looking at a seeding rate that can get up to that range. And within that, one thing that we can mention obviously are the spacings. One of the key things when it comes to peas is obviously just like what we do with most other legumes, which include the sugar beans. The key element is to try to have a bit of a more dense in-row population. So we're looking at a population that can we're looking at a seeding rate that an in-row spacing that can be between around 5 to around 6 centimeters within the row,
from one crop to another within the row.
Yes, your in-row spacing. So that will be around 5 to 6 centimeters. And the inter-row spacing, if you're going to have double lines, you can make sure that you have a 30 centimeter inter-row spacing between your crops. But other farmers usually just to try to leave one they usually just try to leave one row, but other farmers as well who are trying to manage quite a higher population of peas within their hectare, they are going to push more towards the having double rows. Especially when you're going to have a 1.5 meter inter-row spacing between your two lines, your two neighboring rows. So that's one thing that our farmers can try to look into mostly.
And
for the fertilizers
issues, basal dressing, top dressing, supplements.
Lovely. And for the fertilizers, we're going to look at it basically from obviously, I think one of the things us as agronomists, what we usually recommend for our farmers is to make sure that they get to test their soils, obviously, before they grow their crop, because it will come through and help our farmers to determine the nutrients which are in abundance within their soil, and obviously the ones which are lacking within their soil, and they can have a fertilizer program measured obviously based off of that. But as obviously as peas agronomists, we are going to come through and just try to have a bit of a more general recommendation, which includes compound high C, your 62823. We usually recommend that at a rate of around 400 to around 500 kgs over a full hectare. So we're looking at a rate of about 40 to around 50 grams per square meter, 40 to around 50 grams per square meter of your crops. So definitely we're looking at something within that range of your basal fertilizer. And then for the top dressings, we usually recommend them to start from around week 2 after your seed has emerged. We're looking at your first, you are looking at a total of around 250 kgs of ammonium nitrate that you are going to apply between week 2 and week 4,
Okay.
which means that you're going to split apply it. So for your 250 kgs, we usually recommend that you first apply the 125 kgs on week 2, and then you apply the second one at a second application, which you're going to apply at week 4 of 125 kgs as well. So that's about 20.5 grams that you're going to broadcast on your crop as well. Since your crop is dense, it's very hard for you to apply to have spot application.
Okay.
So it's much more easier.
Station.
Exactly.
You just broadcast.
It's much more easier to just broadcast. So you calculate your grammages and you apply on a square meter of your crop. So that is actually highly recommended as well. And during that period as well, quite a number of fertilizer companies, fertilizer manufacturers, they are bringing through some foliar fertilizers as well that help our farmers obviously to try to supplement our crops, to boost our crops as well. So some of those ones, they come through as fertilizers that are foliar fertilizers that assist in terms of the vegetative growth of your plant. So obviously if our farmers get in touch with their favorite fertilizer supplier, they are going
agronomists.
to exactly and agronomists they are going to have to recommend the foliar fertilizers that are recommended by the fertilizer company of choice. And then as we go on to the flowering stage, usually from week 6 to 8, we usually recommend a general application of sulfate of potash as well, which we are going to bring at week 6 and week 8. For the other ones, we'll have the granular type. We're looking at around applying close to around the same range as well as the ammonium nitrate, looking at around 250 kgs, which are going to apply at week 6 and week 8 as well, split in between. So that's about 125 on the 125 on the week 6, and obviously 125 on the week 8 as well. But lately we've been seeing, obviously, since this is a bit of an export crop, there are some companies which are starting to supply some biostimulants which can actually help your plant to they are more organic. They are a bit
organic based.
They are more organic based. And looking at the target market for most of these peas, their target markets obviously are the markets which are a bit much more wary of what they eat. They look more into trying to have foods that have less of the inorganic fertilizers that were the synthetic fertilizers that we're used to having, and trying to have more a bit of a better incorporation obviously of the organic stuff. So it's very necessary for our farmers as well to try to look into those biostimulants as well, and try by all means to incorporate it into their programs.
Thank you so much, Francis, for that. On that note, viewers, we've come to the end of the second segment. We are looking at peas production for export during the winter season. We're going to go on a short commercial break. We'll be right back with this and more in the third and final segment. Stay tuned. Thank you, farmers, for staying tuned to Agricultural New Directions, Agribusiness, in support of Vision 2030. Today, we are looking at peas production. Francis, we are here in this third and final segment. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
As we get into this final segment, Francis, I want us to look at chemical application. You would find that there is an issue of insect pest management, weed management, disease management. What kind of chemicals would you recommend our farmers to use, given that these peas are headed for the export market?
So the first thing that obviously I have to mention is obviously for that actually brings through the importance of what I mentioned earlier, the issue of having your global gap certifications, which sort of like gives you a guide of the chemicals that you're going to use within your crop. Because what you're trying to look at mostly is to try to have chemicals which are within the range, which are within the list of the chemicals that are recommended obviously by the global gap, and also trying to look at the issue of how long they last within your crop. Exactly. So we're trying to look at the withdrawal period that these chemicals have within your crop as well, because we're trying to have chemicals that have the shortest withdrawal periods, but also looking at them being quite effective at controlling your pests as well. So one thing that I usually just recommend obviously for our farmers is to try to come through and recommend scouting. Scouting, regular scouting. You are a farmer, you definitely know the importance of regular scouting.
Have a relationship with your crops.
Exactly. Coming through and talking to your plants, making sure that you get to see even the most basic pests coming through into your crop.
Or grasshoppers.
Exactly. Looking at them right from the start, before they looking at them when they're actually just starting to infest your crop as well. Or probably trying to make sure that they kind of like stay at bay as well. The moment that you start to see they are kind of trying to use starting to see the earliest signs of these pests getting into your crop, you come through with your remedies right there. So scouting is very necessary. You don't have to use chemicals almost every time, but scouting is always necessary to try to bring through these chemicals when or you see your pest is starting to get your crop is starting to get affected by pests. So scouting most definitely is high up on my list. And at the end of the day, we have to look at obviously managing your crops in the right way as well. Sometimes we have been seeing, obviously through some studies, there are quite a number of agronomists out there who are actually bringing through the idea of trying to manage your plant sugars as well, which actually comes through as something that can assist from right in the way that your plant can actually be affected by pests. Because apparently, looking at it from a stage where I have some seasoned agronomists that I've been working with as well, trying to encourage the idea of trying to increase the Brix content, which is the sugar content within your crop, trying to increase the Brix content in a way that it can deter some of these pests and diseases from attacking your crops, because a healthy crop is not going to be affected as much as an unhealthy crop, which is a little bit much more low on the Brix content. So it's something that our farmers have to try to look more into the researching and get to know that their crops can actually get to be managed in a way that they can actually be much more better protected from being attacked by some of these pests as we go.
Thank you so much, Francis, for that. I also want us to look at the type of irrigation that you would recommend that is effective for peas production, and also aligning it to the fact that we need to be a bit conservative this season. We were experiencing an El Nino induced drought. Our water sources are a bit struggling at the moment. Yes. So talk to us in terms of the most effective and efficient irrigation technique that you might want to emphasize its use in peas production.
When it comes to peas, I would really feel it's necessary for us to try to implement the application, the water application methods that save our water, obviously, at the end of the day. But also looking at it from a perspective where we don't want to wet our leaves as well. We don't want to keep our leaves a bit much more moist, because obviously it's moist at the moment. Our leaves are not going to dry up a little bit much more faster if we get them wet during this winter season. So the water kind of like stays on your leaves for a bit much more longer, which kind of like brings through diseases like the fungal infections, obviously the bacterial infections as well. So the best, most effective way that I would really feel obviously is drip. Drip is much more conservative as well, looking at it from the perspective where we have an El Nino induced drought as well this year. Yes. Our water resources are obviously going to be constrained, and the demand is always going to be high for water. So it's much more necessary to try to save it as much as possible and use a much more conservative way like drip irrigation, which supplies the water right within the rooting zone of our plants. And at the end of the day, we're not really having issues where we are going to be using more water than we are supposed to use to, because it's a very bad season and we need to make sure that we protect our crops and our water resources as much as possible.
Finally, Francis, as we close this segment, in a snippet, I want us to touch on issues surrounding post-harvest maintenance. You would want to find that as a farmer, you might get it right during your production periods, and you are now harvesting your crops. So you want to be smiling all the way to the market, all the way to the bank, but there are losses that you can encounter during harvesting and as well as storage. Can you talk to us in a snippet? We are out of time.
I think at the moment what I can just mostly talk about, I think it's just the cold chain management at the end of the day. Managing your temperatures that your crop is going to induce to have right from the field up until it gets to its final destination. It has to be managed in the best way. So in the small scale farmers, we've been seeing, I've been seeing quite a number of them having thatched sheds that they have right within the field as well. So as soon as
cool temperatures,
that have cooler temperatures as well. So right from the moment that it gets harvested, it obviously can the temperature can be controlled right from the moment it's harvested up until it gets to the sorting shed, up until it gets to the pack shed, and the moment it actually gets transported as well. Those temperatures should be managed right from the start, so that your crop doesn't get shocked with temperatures that can get a bit higher, and then it gets into the cooler temperatures as well that we're trying to get, which are within the 3-degree range that you're trying to obviously manage as your crop goes to the market. So it's very necessary for our farmers to get knowledge of that, to make sure that their crop is in the best state for them to is in the best state when they send it to their market.
Thank you so much, Francis, for taking your time to come onto this platform and educate our Zimbabwean farmers in terms of producing peas that are meant for the export market.
Thank you so much.
From me, your host was Zanai Manyora. I'm also on Instagram. We're looking at peas production during the winter season here in Zimbabwe. It was a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you for watching.